Hello, everyone. Ciantier here, and this is my life and channel update for March 2023, and the month got away from me. As you may notice, this is going up in April, and a large part of that is because suddenly it was April 1st, and I had completely forgotten about this, and the month just ended. So that's how it goes. So anyway, let's talk about stuff that's been going on. One of the big ones is that enormous Elden Ring review. It's a little over 3.5 hours that I released late in the month. And it's actually done, by my standards, rather well. So that's fairly exciting. And boy, I just have so many thoughts of different things I'm thinking about with regards to Elden Ring. A lot of it's covered in that review, but like as I keep playing it, just different sort of things come to mind. But I'm probably going to save that for some article writing, I think. I was considering making a too long didn't watch sort of like summary of the Elden Ring review, but ultimately, as I'm thinking about it, I feel that that's a bit redundant. People like long content anyway, right? Otherwise, I've been continuing to work on Astria. The biggest challenge with it is the RPG Maker MV editor is not friendly for the things that I'm trying to do with enemies. Just to kind of go into the game a little bit mechanically here, I've implemented a region hit system similar to Guild Wars 1, where in Guild Wars 1, for those who are unfamiliar, you have 5 armor slots. You have head, torso, hands, legs, and feet. And there's an 8-part ratio of hit as well as armor cost. And some other things related to that. But basically, there's a 3/8 chance you'll be hit in the chest, 2/8 chance you'll be hit in the legs, and then 1/8 chance each for head, arms, and feet, which means that your armor effects on those matter individually. So if you have a stronger chest and leg pieces, but weak hands, heads, and feet, then there's a 3/8 chance you'll be hit in a weaker armor piece and take more damage. So I'm doing a similar system. It's just I've called it head, torso, arms, and legs, or arms and legs is what I've called the different regions in Astria. And so I have by default, RPG Maker MV does not have equipment for enemies, but I've made a plugin that allows me to be able to put equipment on enemies, and then that will also find the skills on those equipment and add it to the pool of skills for enemies to use. And there's some additional tagging that I can do to kind of modify how often the AI will try to use those skills, though I usually don't mess with that. But that means that I can make equipment that the enemies can use and then have a algorithmically generated drop chance on that equipment. So this system is nice at a conceptual level, but the problem is the RPG Maker MV editor is very immutable. And that means that the way to be able to actually assign pieces of gear to enemies is through note tags, not unlike HTML markup tags. So that's a bit of a pain in the butt to work with, and definitely makes me slower at making enemies than I'd like. Otherwise, if I could just, access a filterable drop-down, it would be significantly breezier to make enemies. But alas, that is not the case. So, and then just coming up with stuff can be a little time-consuming as well. Regardless, the point is, making enemies is a bit slow. So I've definitely been a bit slow about making enemies, and I feel like that's one of the big choke points. One of the things that the game just needs more of right now is a variety of enemies to battle. It's an RPG after all, and RPGs often rely on enemy encounters. I have made the first kind of actual dungeon for it, though, and that was a very interesting process of thinking through how I wanted to do it. This is something that I've done a little bit in previous RPG Maker MV games that I've kind of worked on, but this was the first time that I've really kind of sat down and super considered how I was trying to make this to an extent, or it certainly felt a bit fresh to me. So I was wanting to intentionally, because I'm using a checkpoint system not unlike Dark Souls 1, or like the Souls games in general, where you have these crystals that you can attune to, and then from there you can warp to other crystals you've attuned to. and then it'll, when you use one, it will fully refresh your condition, so it will clear status effects off of you and restore your health and mana, resurrect any dead party members, that sort of thing. Although dead party members will resurrect over time, as your like death only lasts so long because the setting is that things don't permanently die here, sort of. There's malevolent energies that generate monsters. Those kind of like die, but then that energy kind of like it. Well, we're not going to into it too much here, but the point is, the dungeon, I wanted to use a checkpoint structure, a shortcut structure, kind of like Souls stuff has often traditionally done, where there's one checkpoint spot for this dungeon. It's not huge. It's not a huge dungeon, but there's one checkpoint spot, and there's a couple of places where you can go back to it. So it has a couple barred from this side. does not open from this side doors that you can unlock. So that was interesting to make, and I'm happy with how that's turned out overall. And there's just a lot of like little things in there that I was like, okay, I need to develop a technique for this. So things like, okay, you flipped a switch. What does that switch do? There are some times where, so there's different ways you can handle that. There's showing some sort of cutscene, showing what happens. You see this a lot in like Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, I think of in particular doing this because I've watched a lot of randomizers for that. But there's also like a message. You can pop up a message. So I think of, for example, in Hexen, there'll be times when you flip a switch and it says a fraction of the puzzle has been solved in the hub area. So like, I forget what the exact numbers are, but it's like a sixth of the puzzle has been solved in the Shadow Wood or things like that, which I think is the way that I'll probably handle something like that if I'm doing something where it's a switch hunt, if that makes sense. Where it's like, okay, you're going out into these world regions to find switches to flip to make something happen in the central area. That's probably the structure that I'd use, because you don't really need to know what it is. It's just like, okay, I just need to find these switches. We could just do nothing and just be like, okay, you flipped a switch. What did it do? Got to go find out. I think that there are times where that's valid to do, but if possible, I think it's good to try to contextualize what the switch means and what result the player is expecting from it. I think of the Bells of Awakening from Dark Souls 1, for example. Those are switches, and you need to pull both of them in either order. In order opens the Sense Fortress, right? And that concept of, okay, well, you rung the bell. It does eventually show you what it does, of course, when you ring the second one. But just thinking about like, okay, you've pulled the switch, and usually they've put whatever that lever or switch does, the thing that it influences right next to it, so you don't need a separate cutscene, right? You don't need some sort of thing. Anyway, I developed a technique for an RPG Maker MV for something that will satisfactorily move the camera to show you the effect of the switch that you just flipped, which was actually weirdly tricky. There's not that I saw a direct pan feature. There is a shift camera, so you can move the camera left, right, up, or down, but you can't do diagonals. So it's not like I can do the camera pan to this location. So because the game is very grid based, which like is fine, but sometimes you want to be able to break that grid, you know. And this is one of those times. So I tried doing stuff with camera pans initially, but trying to figure out how to set up the timing to sync things properly was like, I don't want to figure this one out. So I ended up making the player character invisible, teleporting to them the location I wanted them to be at, and then teleporting them back. Is what my strategy was to solve this particular problem. Yeah. So that worked and produced results I was happy with, but it took a bit of fiddling around to try to figure out how to do that. Don't know why I'm going into all these details, but it's just something that was a big part of this last month, was just figuring that out. So anyway, all that to say, the game has been going well, although I have a busy week this particular week. But is this talking about April? We're thoroughly enough in April. I can save that for the April video. Let's see. And there's just also been a lot of usual levels of introspection. So yeah, the game's been going along well. That video I made, the big Elden Ring video. I'm just reviewing things right now in my mind. So the other kind of big thing that I'm thinking about is just introspection of trying to figure out. Let's see. Last time I talked about. I'm trying to remember the details. Maybe I should have reviewed things ahead of time. But I always do these kind of like live and just stream of consciousness. So, but I talked about some of the like subtle traumas of life last time, and there's just uncovering more stuff and trying to dig down, and it's the sort of thing where like it's an answer to prayer for me, but I also think it's God's timing and direction with just processing stuff. One of the things that I've been wrestling with and trying to figure out how to come to grips with is this idea of contentment. So there's this. I don't know where the origins of it is exactly, but there's this feeling that I have that if I allow myself to be content with a circumstance, that I will no longer want it to change, or it. The way that I'd actually properly phrase it is I feel like if I allow myself to be content with circumstance, then God will say, see, you don't really need that thing that you were wanting. You can be content without it, and then I won't be permitted to get it. God will say, you don't really need that, so you don't get to have it, sort of thing. So I have to leave myself in a miserable, uncontented state, or I won't be able to get the thing that I want. And I don't think this is actually how things work, but I feel it, right? So one of the big things that I'm struggling with is that mind-heart disconnect, where my mind thinks and believes things one way and my heart another, and I'm trying to resolve that conflict. So there's a couple of big areas that I find discontentment in, and want to feel like I can let go of to an extent. One of them, like probably the most pressing one, is the desire for a lover, a spouse. Traditionally, that's sort of the context for that. But if I'm, going down to the core thing, it's a lover. And can I singleness is so I know a relationship is a work, right? There's work that you have to do there, but I'd rather put my energy towards that than carrying the burden of singleness. But a spouse is one of those things that's super, the sort of person that you marry is really important, because it's supposed to be a commitment. In my mind, it's a commitment that you're making. Is not a trivial thing, and that's a person that is being drawn particularly close to you, and so they have a lot of influence in your life. So that's something that matters a lot. And so it's the sort of thing where it's not a decision, that's just not something to, as much as I would like to rush into something, it's not something that is good to rush into, I think, a lot of times. And I think it's something where God knows it's an area where I can be particularly weak, so he's not going to expose me to something that could be dangerous to me that way. But I do want a spouse, and I feel like if I allow myself to find contentment in singleness in my current living situation, that God will say, aha, so you don't really need one, and will leave me single. And it's this weird internal tension. I feel similarly about wanting more space and things like that. And there's a lot of complicated stuff with my living situation right now internally for me. Stuff that I'm still kind of actively processing, so I'm not really sure how to talk about it just yet. So that's one area that I've been really struggling. Another thing, though, that I have been reflecting on is the nature of the sort of love that I crave. The phrase "I love you" is for me somewhat empty. And this is largely because love as a word in English is so broad as to be connected to such a myriad of ideas as to be somewhat meaningless to me. It's connected to too many things. So what I've come to ponder and realize is that it's the specific thing that I want is to feel accepted and desired. That somebody wants me in their life. That I'm wanted, desired, and accepted. Like, I want to be able to feel safe as the full extent of who I am. But what I'm realizing right now, and this is getting into April stuff, but whatever, it's life is continuous, is that I need to do some additional processing on who even am I, because there's this the person I think I have to consider myself as being. It's that mask that is socially acceptable, and who's the real me underneath it. And I think that there's an inherent dissonance that's happening there that I'm needing to process. I'm realizing that there's a lot of baggage that I have from partway through college, which is when I started to really experience difficulty. Like, in school, I have a brain that is highly compatible with standard academic procedures at school. I tend to be a calm, quiet boy, and school stuff came, like, I learned fairly quickly and easily, and so school stuff came pretty easily to me. So during my whole experience in public school, it was quite easy, and that meant that I got good grades without really trying, and I didn't know how to handle difficulty. I remember having a bit of a minor breakdown when I had, like, I've also traditionally been a procrastinator, which doesn't help anything in the long run either. But if it's all easy, it doesn't matter if you put off until the last minute, right? But I remember having 2 7-page papers due at about the same time in, I don't know if it was, I feel like it was probably like middle school, but it might have been high school. I legit don't remember anymore. It's all when I was a kid to my brain. Like, I have the clear divide between when I started college and so before that is like when I was a kid, and then there's when I started college, and that's when I kind of hit like that adult phase or whatever, hit that phase of life. So everything before that, and when we moved at that time, for me going out to college, but that partly helps create that clean break. But I had like a English paper and a social studies paper that were both 7-page papers due at the same time, and I didn't know how to handle that because I procrastinated and was super overwhelmed feeling by that. I remember that distinctly, and I got through it okay, but that was like the point of hardship that I remember in my schooling. And even when I went to college, like, the first 2 years were pretty easy for me, in part because I came into it. I went to DigiPenn Institute of Technology, for those who want reference and want context. And so that school is known for being pretty difficult, particularly when I went to it. I don't know how it is these days. I've not been keeping up. But programming worked pretty well for my brain. And I already came in having spent time studying C++. So I had it, and like, I had a history of programming. So a lot of those early programming classes were like filling in details and refining skills that I'd already been working on myself. And so it was very easy for me. But then in like junior year is when things actually started getting really difficult for me, and I had no tools for dealing with it. I didn't know how to handle that sort of failure. And I think, and I had some other, like, I had some brain fog going on at the time. And so I think that it's during some of that time when I had some of those issues that were suddenly popping up, where I had problems with failing classes and things like that. And I just didn't know how to cope. And I had other stuff going on. It was a very weird time. But I think that has done a lot for me. And then since then, I don't feel like I've ever developed the sort of success that people expect someone to achieve. And so I've had to wrestle with, I feel like I have to present myself as successful for people to accept me, but I also kind of feel like a failure in many regards. And part of it is like I've succeeded at things, but those things haven't succeeded in the way that it feels like they need to. So like I made a game with a small indie studio called Vernacular Games. And we made a game called Highway to the Moon. It took us quite a long time to make it, in part because we were making our own engine, because Unity wasn't in the place when we started it as it is now. I mean, you can go find it. It's on Steam. There's a playthrough that I did of it on this channel too, if you're curious. You can find it, but we made that game, and there's things about it that I'm still quite proud of and quite happy about, but it wasn't a commercial success at all. And this YouTube channel is quite small and never really took off, and the Twitch streaming that I did never really took off anywhere. Like, there's good things that have come out of it for sure, but none of these have really been career paths that have gone anywhere. So I don't know, it's very difficult as I see my birthday coming up soon, and feeling like I've not hit the life milestones that I'm supposed to have by this point. And feeling like that makes me unacceptable to other people. And the question, what do you do for a living, is a point of dread. I feel like I have the brain of a couple centuries ago aristocrat who wants to think and philosophize and sometimes write poetry and be a patron of the arts. And this world is not where I'm at anyway, have that role in quite that way. It's not a socially acceptable role. It's not a socially acceptable life in America. And that's something that is really difficult. So I don't know. That's a lot of thinking and processing. My sleep schedule's better than it has been, so that's been nice. Oh, the other thing that I should mention that I was thinking about beforehand, before recording this has gotten kind of long, hasn't it? Is that I've decided to also step away from Twitter. Twitter is so close to being like the idea of the micro tweet, the micro blog, is so good. Like just sharing random small thoughts that pop up as they come up, and having people see them, and kind of interacting in that way is so good. But the actual Twitter experience doesn't execute on that idea super well, in part because it has to be monetizable, in part because it's bringing too many disparate groups together. It's just what people have found to do with that model versus what it's capable of is saddening. But the main reason I actually got my Twitter following curated in a way, and I stuck on the following tab, that I was pretty satisfied with, like, the experience, and I was enjoying the interactions I was having with people. But the problem is Twitter encourages distractibility, and that's something that I'm trying to deal with. So I took a week-long hiatus from Twitter and popped on long enough to wrap up a few loose ends that I wanted to touch on, and then back away again. And I don't know. It's just, if we if we had something where we're focused more on building community instead of fighting for causes, I feel like that sort of thing could be a lot better. But alas, it is what it is. And I don't know if there's I don't know. I'm not looking for a Twitter alternative is the thing. But I do kind of miss the potential for those interactions. The main place that I'm kind of looking for the social connection at this point online is Discord. So I have a Discord server that's mostly inactive, but I've been a little bit more active in putting stuff there lately just because I don't have the Twitter outlet, I guess, in part. But also just kind of intentionally. So yeah, I guess that's a collection of thoughts and things that have been going on. Hope you all are doing well. We'll see what sort of reception this gets, But until next time, everyone, take care. Goodbye.